Welcome to May's monthly kids cooking class. My name is Anna in the Growing Chefs Ontario Classroom Kitchen, and for this month, I'm going to show you how to make pasta primavera. Primavera means spring in Italian, and this pasta dish is full of lots of spring vegetables like asparagus. Now, this pasta sounds Italian, but it was actually developed in New York City in the 1970s at a very fancy restaurant called Cirque. So let's make sure you've gathered all of your ingredients and equipment, and you've washed your hands, and let's get started. So the star of this recipe is the asparagus, of course, and asparagus is a very fun spring vegetable. And near the bottom, it starts to get a little bit tougher, and so we want to get rid of that because it's not as fun to eat. So holding your asparagus firmly, you're just going to snap it at the bottom, and it naturally snaps off exactly where it needs to. So I'm going to do this with the rest of our asparagus. So now that our asparagus has lost its woody end bit, now we're going to cut it into chunks. And the great thing about this pasta dish is that it allows lots of opportunity for you to experiment and try out different ways of cutting vegetables. So for example, if I were to cut this into larger chunks, it's going to take a lot longer to cook than if I were to just cut it in very thin pieces like this. And when you're doing this, make sure that you're using your bear claw. You've got your fingers tucked back, and you're just letting the knife do all the work. I'm going to leave the spears whole because they are my favorite part. Another spring vegetable are spring onions or scallions or green onions. And I'm going to separate these into the leafy top and then the heartier end. And we're actually going to cook this part, and we're going to leave this part for garnish. Now, if you are still learning how to use a knife, that's okay. Scissors are a really great tool for cutting up leafy things like green onions or herbs. So next we need to work with our garlic, and there are a few different ways that you can deal with the garlic for this recipe. You can slice it, you can chop it, or you can rasp it, which is one of my favorite ways to cut up garlic very finely because it's going to give us a really strong garlic flavor. So next are leafy greens. And if you're using a baby spinach or a baby kale for this recipe, you don't need to cut it up. It's the perfect size where it is because we're going to wilt it, and it's going to get really small when it loses all of its water content. So for this spinach, I need to cut it up a little bit. And this spinach and chard actually came from our garden. We overwintered them. So this is really exciting to have the first vegetables of spring. And to cut my chard and my spinach, I'm going to stack them on top of each other like this, and then I'm going to roll it like this. And you can either use scissors or you can use a knife for this. And this is called a chiffonade, although it's going to be a big chiffonade. I don't want to cut them too small because, like with the baby spinach, it's going to shrink a lot when we wilt it in our pasta. This stalk of the chard, you can cut up really fine and cook it with your onions because it does need a little bit longer cooking time than your leafy greens. All right, so next is my lemon, and I'm going to zest and juice this lemon. I want the zest because it has a really nice bright citrusy flavor, but I don't want the pith underneath. That's a little bit bitter. And last but not least, my cheese. I'm using a Parmesan cheese for this recipe. I've also made it with whatever I've had in my fridge, like an old cheddar, for instance, or something like that, but Parmesan is the #1 go-to. So all of our ingredients are prepped And a note about our pasta, this beautiful orecchiette was made for me by Chef Nick, and we have a recipe video as a part of this monthly kids cooking class for that as well. So let's get cooking. Before you get started cooking, make sure that you put on a pot of boiling water and you salt it really well so it tastes like the sea. We want this to start boiling while we're cooking our pasta sauce so that everything is ready at the same time. One thing to keep in mind, if you're using fresh pasta, your pasta will only take 2 to 3 minutes to fully cook, whereas if you're using a dried pasta for this recipe, it's going to take closer to 6 to 7, 8 minutes, depending on the type of pasta that you're using. To get started, I want to heat up my butter and oil. I'm using both for flavor. This pasta dish comes together pretty quickly, so I want to make sure that I'm cooking things in order of their density and how long that they're going to take to cook. So I'm going to start with my chard stems and my green onions, but also my asparagus, because that's going to take a little longer to cook as well. When things have started to cook a little bit more, that's when I'll add my garlic. I don't want to add my garlic right at the beginning because garlic can actually burn pretty easily. I'm going to put in my lemon zest and my leafy greens and my peas. So believe it or not, this pasta dish is actually almost done. So I'm going to put in my fresh pasta to cook. So what I have here is a beautiful pan of green vegetables, and to bring it all together for our pasta sauce, I'm just going to add a little bit of cream and our cheese. I've also seen recipes for this pasta dish using full-fat yogurt, and I've tried it at home and it works great. So if you don't have whipping cream, yogurt, plain yogurt, works great. I'm also going to add in some of my cheese. So look at these big, beautiful noodles. Well, I guess they're not really noodles, they're pasta shapes. They're orecchiette, which means little ear in Italian. And when you are making your pasta shapes at home, remember when they cook, they're going to expand and get a lot bigger. And you can test the doneness of your pasta shape by cutting it in half or trying it. And you want to make sure that it doesn't have any like a raw look in the middle. And to me, it's feeling done. So that's great. Now I'm going to turn off this heat. Before I add it, I'm just going to give my dish a try. It tastes really good. All right, so here we go. I really like the method of just scooping over your noodles because you get some of the pasta water in there, and that pasta water is starchy and will really help with the texture of our sauce. So it is looking a little bit soupier than it was before, but that's okay. That is going to go away very quickly. And the rest of our cheese is also going to help with that process. You can also add a little bit of lemon juice at this point too if you think it needs a little bit of brightness. And our herbs. And that's it. That is our Primavera pasta sauce. So you'll notice that it's not really a saucy pasta, and it's not supposed to be. The cream is just supposed to be a really nice light coating on the vegetables and the pasta. We didn't make an Alfredo, which would have a much heavier, creamier sauce. If you want this to have a little bit more cream in it, just add a bit more cream, a bit more yogurt. Cook it down until you get the right thickness that you're looking for. This is a great pasta dish to experiment with your skills and try new things out because it's different every time you make it, and you really get to figure out what you're looking for in terms of the thickness of your sauce and how everything is cooking together. So I really hope you enjoy this pasta dish, and I'd love to see your pictures. Thanks for cooking with me.